Hogstye.
And with that, with a whimper, the season ends with the most boring, unimaginative, dull, bland Super Bowl I've ever seen in my life. But it's the Hogstye, and now we get to my favorite part of the football season, the offseason.
First of all, your intro was boring and dull and bland as well, just for the record.
Yes, just like the Super Bowl.
It was you're analogizing to the game. Is that it?
Yes. We had a boring Super Bowl that nobody thought was a fun game unless they were an Eagles fan, which is nobody.
Really was a pretty awful game to watch.
It was a brutal game to watch.
It's fun. It's funny because I said that to an Eagle fan buddy of mine at work, and I got labeled as a hater. Didn't appreciate the game, the NFL. Didn't understand the full scope of what happened, how they took down Casey and that juggernaut and this. I'm like, dude, you're an Eagle fan. Of course, you're gonna love that game. Right. I mean, it's like me going back to when Washington played Denver, and we mopped them up. I loved that game. Everyone else thought it was boring.
Brought to you by the same people that literally tore down light poles, in celebration.
Hey, they got their revenge because that light pole killed that kid in their last riot.
I guess, yeah.
They needed to get revenge on the light poles for killing that kid.
Well, see, that's the crazy part. It was just 2 weeks ago we had someone fall from that street sign and die. And what do? Someone does it again. I'm just like, it's just embarrassing having to deal with some of the crap that's up here.
The people of Philadelphia, not named Earl, are bad people.
Dave, they can't let the light poles win.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm serious. They're just bad. They're just not good people in the city. That's why it's the city of hate. They're just bad people. Dave's family aside, they're just bad people. I'm sorry to bring
Dave, we were glad to hear that you put out all the fires in your neighborhood before the show.
Yeah. Yes. It's funny because in my conversations with somebody at work about this game, when I said it was boring, got labeled as a hater and all that stuff and everything, right away he wanted to come and attack me because of the fact that I didn't want to put Jalen Hurts before the Super Bowl within the top 5 at that moment. I had about 5 to 7. I talked, about the game and how I was like, Eagles need to do this against Mahomes. You give them this. I gave serious discussion about the game, right? And right away it came in. He attacked me because I was an Eagle hater, didn't believe that the Eagles are going to do what they're going to do. And I'm just like, dude, where is this coming from, man? I gave you an honest assessment, man. He just went off the rails. I was like, you know what, dude?
Well, also,
whatever.
I mean, like in life, man. Your team won. What are you doing? Yelling at people over. That's just silly. In terms of this.
And you know what? It's funny you say that because I turned to him. I'm like, you know what? You are the most miserable Eagle fan after a Super Bowl win that I've ever met in my life. That's insane to me.
They're all miserable, Dave. He's not the most miserable one. He's just another one.
Yeah, most of social media is just Eagles fans being mad that Jaden Daniels still exists. It seems like. Rather than being happy that they won, they're mad Jaden Daniels is alive.
Because the people in the city of hate cannot ever be happy about anything. They have to be miserable.
Right.
Which isn't surprising considering where they live. They live in the city of hate.
Right. It's terrible weather, just like DC. It's like it's too hot in the summer and it's too cold in the winter. You don't have a lot going on other than that.
But there's a unique cauldron of hate that just broils. I think it's, excuse me, joking here. I think it sits and it boils under the street, and it leaks out. The fumes from it leak out through the grates in the street, and through the drainage areas,
and it makes everyone irrationally angry.
Yes,
it's the plot of Ghostbusters 2. Steve just described the plot of Ghostbusters 2.
Kind of, yeah. I'm just kind of pathetic that you know that, but but that's what it is.
That was like the 10th best movie of my childhood, right there.
I don't know if I've seen Ghostbusters 2.
My nephew told me this. several years ago after the Phillies won the World Series and the Eagles won their first Super Bowl. He said the only thing about this city that he can't stand is that because they've been miserable for so long with their sports franchises,
Mm-hmm.
they do not and they will never learn or understand how to be winners in this town. Even right now, for as good as the Eagles organization is, you can label them even as a gold standard with how Roseman's doing up there. They're doing a great job. They
It doesn't
just
matter.
don't know how to handle winning.
Doesn't
No.
matter. They're miserable. They're miserable.
So-
In terms of the game itself,
Mhm.
I gotta say I was surprised. I don't think any of us predicted. I know I didn't. The level at which the Philadelphia defense was able to pressure and get to Patrick Mahomes. And I
Right.
don't just literally mean get to him. He wasn't right mentally. In it, they put so much pressure on him that he made a bunch of mistakes he doesn't normally make. And I'll tell you this, I think that the Kansas City Chiefs got a little bit too big for their britches, so to speak. I don't think they were prepared very well. I don't think they were a hungry team that was solely focused on winning. I think they were buying into their hype a little bit more than any of us realized. And they walked in there and just expected to win. And meanwhile, you have the Eagles, the number one defense in football,
Yeah.
really tore them up.
It wasn't just defense though. Their offense.
It wasn't, yeah.
Their offense pretty much did whatever they wanted.
I
for
was
most of
just
the game, too.
amazed though at how bad they made Patrick Mahomes look.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Well,
Terrible.
and
That might
you
have been
have
the
to
worst game of his career in recent years.
you have to also put a lot of that on the line itself. Like they just completely overpowered the Kansas City Chiefs offensive line throughout the whole game.
Right.
But I think there were some huge mistakes in the game planning, like you mentioned. At one point late in the second quarter, I tweeted, "Have they run the ball?" Because I think they'd run one run by 25 minutes into the game on the Kansas City side.
Right.
They had no balance. Andy Reid went right to his worst instincts, which is just throw it every time.
Well, I mean,
even when it's not working.
Well, I'm not going to do stats because we don't care that much, but
No.
by the entire team, the entire game, 11 carries for 49 yards. That's Kansas City's rushing in this game. And the leading rusher is Patrick Mahomes, 4 for 25. And so the rest of these jokers combined for 7 carries for 7 to 25 yards. 24
That sounds
yards.
like me playing a game of Madden.
7 carries for 24 yards.
Yeah.
Between Kareem Hunt, Samaje Perine, and Isaiah Pacheco.
Right.
That's pathetic.
Yeah,
It is.
it got about halfway through the second quarter, and I'm texting my brother in this group we have with our friends. I'm like, I turned to him. I was like, congratulations, guys. That's which one of you guys are gonna go to the parade? And of course, you can't say that already. I said this game has every feel of that game that when they played Tampa Bay.
Yeah.
It was completely, constant pressure on Mahomes. He was unable to get settled, unable to get in the rhythm, and it's not like an elite defense beats Mahomes all the time, because that first Super Bowl against San Francisco, San Francisco had a great defense, contained Mahomes in the first half for the most part, but he was able to move the ball a little bit, and then Mahomes and the Chiefs adjusted, and they went ahead and they wound up beating. They pretty much dominated that second half.
They've beat a lot of good defenses, not just that one.
But he was unable to do that against Philadelphia. And the one question I've raised to a couple of people is that when you look at this Eagle team, for as balanced as they were, offense, defense, special teams, and everything they did throughout the course of the whole year, through the playoffs, and how dominant they were in a Super Bowl, where do you rank them as single season performances for among the Super Bowl era? I mean, that's comparable to what the 91 Redskins did in many aspects. I mean, they weren't as explosive in the passing game as they were then, but what they did overall as a team.
Yeah, but this year they didn't. I mean, the Chiefs got lucky several times in the regular season.
He's talking about Philly.
I'm talking about Philly.
Oh, Philly. Oh, sorry.
I mean, Philly.
How do you I mean, I
still
think their offense has had a little bit of ups and downs, at times, but their defense, never did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And people forget, again, I'll say it again. I mean, if Jalen Hurts had been in the first Washington game, or the second, was that the second one?
The second one.
Yeah,
they lost. Yeah.
The Eagles would have won.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everybody, but the Eagles would have won.
Well, I mean, you actually saw that in the NFC Championship game. We turned the ball over 4 times. They converted those. They converted
That's
everyone
exactly right.
to touchdowns. It's exactly what would have happened in that second game when we had 5 turnovers.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I mean, look, there's no question the Eagles. We haven't seen many dominating performance like that in the Super Bowl.
It used to happen more, but
It,
never like at 40 points.
right.
That was rare.
right.
I mean, people talk about what was it, Seattle, Denver, back in 2013 or 2012 as like a recent-ish one. That one was pretty strongly dominated throughout the whole game. Obviously, Washington had the Denver game that you brought up too. Denver got beat up a lot in the Super Bowl, didn't they? Like,
Yeah. Yes, they do.
They did. They did.
Yeah.
I mean, this
Early
game
on.
at one point was 40-6.
yeah, yeah.
And they scored a bunch of garbage time points, to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, the game was terrible.
It-
I think the ratings were through the roof despite that, but that's in part because streaming is so prevalent,
Yeah.
nowadays.
I think
And Nielsen's figured out how to
126
count.
million is what I saw, something
Yeah,
around there.
Nielsen's figured out how to count differently and more accurately, and they're starting to count bars and restaurants and stuff differently, and so there's a reason why the numbers are bigger.
Well, streaming is so much easier to count from
Yeah,
like
because you know exactly who's
right.
doing
You know
it.
exactly how many people are hitting a link. It's very simple.
Right.
But my point is, like, no matter where it ranks in reality, it's that the fact that the game was bad didn't deter people from watching the game.
No,
So it appears.
no.
Now we don't know when they turned it off. That we haven't seen stats about complete games and stuff. So we don't know about that.
That would be interesting. I would, because I'm sure they do have that, especially with the streaming data. But I would wonder if you felt like a drop off at halftime, because like
I'm
that
sure you
game,
did. Did you
yeah.
guys
Yeah.
watch the whole game?
I did. Yeah.
I watched the whole thing, but reluctantly, and I got bored at the end.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
was
did.
definitely scrolling through Twitter and stuff by the last quarter.
Yeah,
Not
me
really
too.
paying.
I mean, I wasn't doing that, but I was just, fooling
Right.
around. Yeah.
Right. I'm look up. Okay, still no. Okay, Patrick Mahomes is still just gonna sit there and look like an idiot. All right. Uh, we're not gonna go to Taylor Swift because Travis Kelce hasn't done anything good. All right, great.
Thank God.
Yeah. By the way, so post-mortem on this game, obviously we're gonna have to deal with the Eagles for a while as
Yes.
Washington fans, but that Chiefs team, they kind of have to totally rebuild now. Don't like they're getting old. A lot of those receivers they had around there were like 1 year guys, right? Like I know Hopkins is a free agent. They got a lot of older names on that roster.
Kelsey's 35.
Yeah, Kelsey's probably going to hang it up soon. If not this year, the next year.
DeAndre Hopkins has
Right.
got to be pushing. How DeAndre
He's
Hopkins?
31, I think.
He's 32. It says.
Oh, 32? Okay.
And even Smith Schuster isn't a total young guy. Yeah, he's 28.
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe Hopkins says he's going to retire after this year, but they have Hollywood Brown coming back, where she writes after he goes through his suspension most likely, and then obviously Xavier Worthy. I think that's really their receiving.
Well, what they
corps
need
so
is
far next
what
year.
they need is a running game. That's what
Yes.
the
Yeah.
Chiefs need. They don't have. I mean, when Samaje P. Ryan is who you're relying on, you have a problem.
Right.
Well, unfortunately, they lost Pacheco like they did through the course of the year, and he never got in the rhythm. And he's a volume runner, so
He's not exactly
Eagles-
O.J. Simpson, though.
No.
No.
And the Eagles took him out of the game. Well, actually, really, Andy Reid, really, like you mentioned earlier, took him out of the game plan pretty early. So, but what they need is what Kareem Hunt gave them in the very beginning of his career, before he went off and started hauling off on women.
Yeah.
It's just
He's a scumbag.
I mean, yeah, but that's
He is.
that-
And I saw some rumor that Tyreek Hill might have gotten in some trouble against it too.
Again, God.
Yeah.
These
I
guys,
forgot to mention that pre-show, but I'd have to Google it to double check how legit it was, because it seemed too ridiculous to be real. So.
And I would like to point out
Yeah.
that I intentionally boycotted the halftime show because I'm so irritated that it's just nothing but a string of rappers instead of like actually mixing things up like they used to. I don't know if you guys watched it. I intentionally did not. I turned the channel.
I mean, there was nothing to turn the channel to, so I just left it on, and that's when I was refilling my food plate. I made a nice rack of ribs for the game, so I had that going for me.
I actually turned to my PS5 and turned that on and played through halftime. I don't
Nice.
I don't like the halftime show at all, period, because it takes away from the flow of the game. If a team's building momentum going into halftime, but then halftime, it's like 40 minutes long. It's
Long
insane.
time,
It's
yeah.
like that flow of the game, the momentum that you have going into the second half is so important for teams sometimes.
Right.
And the biggest game of the year, they take that away. I've always hated the halftime shows.
You're not wrong, but you know what they don't care about? The NFL doesn't care about?
Exactly what I said.
Yes.
Yes.
Because
Now-
it's an entertainment spectacle, and so they want entertainer of the week up there, unless it's Jay-Z, in which case he'll put a bunch of washed up rappers.
Yeah.
Right.
I will say I don't think we need to go all the way back to like the other end of what it was, where somebody posted a video from like one of the first halftime
It
shows.
was like marching bands and stuff.
This one was women with reindeer antlers on, like prancing around on the field in outfits.
I don't
Yeah.
think that would be acceptable in 2025.
For a lot of reasons, it's not acceptable in 2025. Both far too woke reasons and far too anti-woke reasons and far too everything. Like it, and it's just awful.
Oh,
It was
because it's
just
not entertaining either.
yes.
No.
That's the biggest crime. It is not entertaining.
All my point has always been like, it doesn't just have to be a bunch of rappers and hip hop people. There's a lot of other genres of music that when you hire Jay-Z, you're not going to get. They need to fire Jay-Z.
Look, the height of the halftime show, like the true spectacle height, was when it would be, hey, it's going to be this musician with this musician with this musician, and they would cross genres a lot, and they would do things like Janet Jackson with who was
Well, it was
NSYNC.
Aerosmith
Justin
and Britney
Timberlake.
Spears was probably the most,
Yeah.
famous one of those.
Right, but
Other
doing
than
all
Justin
that kind of
Timberlake
weird
ripping
stuff.
Janet Jackson's clothes off. I mean, that's
Right.
But yeah.
But that was fun. Who didn't like it? This
The
is a
network didn't
sport
like
for
it, that's
red-blooded Americans, Steve. If you don't
The
like
network
it,
didn't like it. That's who
Yeah.
didn't like it.
well, the network can grow up.
No, the FCC won't let them.
The FCC can grow up too. I work across the street from them. Whenever they actually have somebody in the building, I'll tell them grow up.
Well, please feel free. Doesn't matter. The kids are watching, apparently.
Yeah. Well,
Not
and
to
we're
Alice.
going to be
Not
putting
in
all this.
Alice's world.
It's all going to be streaming in the next 5 years anyway. The FCC has no say anymore.
It's not
once
all
that
going to
happens.
be streaming. It'll never just be streaming, Alex.
I know. I'm speaking in hyperbole, but
Yeah.
I'd say
we are
you're
good.
just speaking inaccurately, but
Yeah, the world is going in different directions, and the FCC has less control there.
they do.
So,
That is
yeah.
true. But I'm never going to stop railing on this until they get better. So every year I'm going to do this.
I agree that they need to do better. I just don't, and I don't even think just getting rid of Jay-Z solves the problem though. Like, I think they've kind of run out of steam in terms of finding somebody who can make these
I could
great
name
spectacles.
a million of them. I mean, Jay-Z does not know the music industry as a whole. He knows hip hop.
He knows his segment of it. I know.
Yeah,
Right.
which is fair enough. But
Yeah.
Well, see, the one thing that kills
you could
me
get
is-
Live Nation to produce it or something, and whoever, and they could do it. A variety of artists.
The one thing kills me is that you're in Louisiana, for crying out loud. You're in a hub of some of the best music down there.
Mhm.
It's just like, I mean, granted, you may not be able to find a flashy name that you want that everyone may recognize, but
Get
the
Winston
music's gonna be
Marsalis out
good.
there to play some jazz.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's the area. I mean, just look at what they do doing Mardi Gras and stuff like that down there. There's a performance right there. You can almost just rip off the street and put it in the stadium, and everybody would enjoy it.
The NFL has been historically terrible. Basically, they've made their effort to highlight local talent in the halftime show is totally non-existent. They've
Yeah.
never
Yes.
done that.
It's the one thing I'm not as much into, like the Olympics opening ceremonies, but the
Yeah.
Olympics always kind of tries to nail that. Let it be a local thing.
I mean, I had a bunch of people in my rock world, when the Super Bowl was in San Francisco, talking about Metallica because Metallica's from, and I kept saying, you guys don't understand how the NFL works.
Yeah.
It's not going to be Metallica. That's way too rock and roll for them. So
Yeah,
anyway, we can move on. I don't want to rail on this, but
they
I
only
did for a
play
minute.
nonstop Metallica songs during games, you know?
You never at halftime.
Yeah. But, you know, like intros and like things like that.
Yeah, they do.
All right, we can move
I
on.
would say this though, they need to get the Foo Fighters. That needs to be the rock. Foo
That's
Fighters
been
is the
the
rock
one
band.
band that I think you and I have agreed on should be
That's
doing
the
it.
one. That's the one.
Yeah.
And I'm not a massive Foo Fighters fan, but that's the one.
I think that's the one that most people resonate with anyway when you talk
Yes,
about that genre.
that's exactly right.
It's also one of the few ones that's a good rock band that hasn't completely aged out, which is harder and harder to find.
And they're a stadium act still to this day.
Yeah, that too. All right, why don't we move on? It is now officially the off season for all you NFL fans. It is the off season for if you're a spring football fan like me. It's about to be the regular season again. But
nobody is a spring football fan like you, Alex. I'm
no,
sorry to tell you.
No. Hey, there's like 8 other guys with podcasts about the spring football leagues, and I don't listen to any of them even.
Do they have 8 listeners between them?
That's what I'm wondering.
That would be what, 8 mothers?
Yeah, exactly right.
Oh no, never let your mom listen to your podcast, guys. This is my life. If you ever want to start a podcast out there, never let your family listen.
My mom has listened to a couple of these and doesn't understand what we're talking about and stopped listening.
Yeah, that's what happens every time, and then they're just disappointed in you, or at least if they're Jewish. I don't know about non-Jewish mothers, but like Jewish mothers just get disappointed.
No, my mother was not disappointed. It was like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
it was that.
Also, wives, don't let wives listen. Definitely don't let your boss listen. That's another one.
Well, yeah. Why do you think nobody knows who I really am on this show, Alex?
Yeah. My boss was listening. He said he listened to 2 episodes when we were talking about Chase Young, because he knew Chase Young, and he was like, "Yeah, he's gonna be a bust." He warned me about it. Like I've told you guys that on there.
No, you never did tell me your boss said he was gonna be a bust.
Yeah, he knew him from DeMatha. And he's like, he's not gonna work out.
So old Steve was right, and it was obvious to the people who knew him from the beginning.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me just go over a little bit about off-season for those of you who are new here, and because we have to fill up an entire off-season full of stuff to talk about. And so what we do every year, we will cover free agency by position group, which we're going to start today. Alex wrote up some stuff on linebackers and tight ends, and we're doing 2 and 1 mainly because I waited too long for the second year in a row to set the schedule. But we will do pre-draft coverage, which is going to start in a couple weeks, and that is timed to end the week before the draft. So, there is a method to the madness. And then we will do, once that gets done, we will start on our position group breakdowns, which will take us through to training camp. And so then the idea behind the position group breakdowns is after free agency, after the draft, how they put it all together and how will it work, and by position group. So that's that. So that's what we do every off season, and we're going to start that today. And so, but before we do that, I did slog through the 2025 salary cap on this past Sunday. And so we're not going to go into detail or anything, but just generally speaking here in terms of salary cap, I've got Washington at about 79 million in free space. Now, where that is coming from is a bit of an estimate because we don't know the salary cap. The salary cap has been estimated by insiders is probably between 265 and 275. I aimed low and set it at 275. And now Washington also has 19 million in rollover cap, which rolls over from the prior season. So that's 19 million. So then they've got 284 million, and it might be more because there's always some cap adjustments that the NFL makes that I've never bothered to try to figure out where they're getting it.
Now, is that in part based off of like roster performance bonus stuff?
Yeah, it's stuff like that. And again, it's just too much brain damage for this is not a real job for me, Right.
You also don't have access to that level of detail.
No, well, I could probably figure it out if I sat down and do it, but I don't want to. Even for me, that's too nerdy. So, so what that puts Washington's salary cap figure at somewhere around 284 million.
Right.
Now, and of that, they've got between that roster and dead cap, because they've got 8 million in dead cap. they've got about 214.5 million on a cap hit, occupied cap space. What I'm trying to say.
Right.
So now what you got to figure though, because that's a lot more. That's about 70. That's 70 million. But in terms of space that they're going to want to actually spend, okay, so they're going to try to leave. They always leave about 10 million for just emergencies. And then you got to figure in the draft picks, which is going to be about another 10. And so if you take the somewhere around between 70, 75 million, and then you subtract 20 million from that, roughly you're talking, think 50 million ish. That's the amount of money they can spend in free agency as a ballpark. So there you go. There's your cap space.
Right. And of course, 50 million sounds like a lot, but when it comes to signing big name free agents, that can get eaten up very quickly.
And that's annual cap space. And so so if you sign somebody that has a $30 million cap hit for 2025, that's more than half your space.
Right.
Not that they would maybe do that, but that's what Alex's point is.
Right. And of course, there are going to be a lot of other factors, and we can get into all that through the season, obviously, as things come along. Tony Wiley's got a big cap hit, for example, the John Allen contract. There's going to be cuts and re-signings that will change these numbers quite a bit as we go
I gave
through.
an overview of all that in my 2 pieces for the past 2 weeks.
You did.
Yeah, yes. And so you can go through that. And I mean, Wiley is cuttable. John Allen, if they want to make one, I'm just telling you guys right now, if they want to make one big move, it's got to be Jonathan Allen.
Right.
Jonathan Allen is the one. Because, I mean, he's got a massive cap hit, this year. He's got $22 million cap hit. His dead cap
coming off an injury. He's also
Yep. And he's only got $6 million in dead cap, so he's the one that they get rid of and create a lot of space easily. Andrew Wiley's about 10 in salary cap hit, and he's got a dead cap of a couple million, so they would save, I think it was 7 million ish.
Yeah. And one move that people don't talk about a lot, I'll just mention it here, that you should start thinking about it if you're a fan. Terry McLaurin's got 1 year left on his deal. They should probably be considering extending him and adjusting his cap number for this year,
or trading him.
Well, I don't think they should trade him, but
you
that would also be on the
idea
table.
When I mentioned this 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. Oh, we did talk about it 2 weeks ago, didn't we?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah. Okay. I can't
remember
what we talked about on the show versus off the show.
I said you brought it up. So McLaurin, this year, if I can flip to it, he's got a $25.5 million cap hit.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
It is. Now, he's a number one receiver. It's not outrageous for that, but
by himself, he's responsible for a shade under 9% of the salary cap.
Yeah.
As I estimated it.
Right. So that kind of covers the cap situation for Washington. They have a lot of money to play with. I think they're now third or fourth in the league in terms of most cap space. They were at one point number 2, but I think the trade they made for
Lattimore.
For Lattimore, that ate up a bunch of it. So because I think he's got close to 18 million or
Lattimore's 18 this year.
Yeah, so that ate up some of that,
which is
space.
About 15 more than he's worth.
Yeah, probably. Probably so. Another guy who I guess you could in theory try and do something with that contract if you wanted to. But they won't. Because they don't want to be wrong about that trade. All right, so we do have to do our free agency previews. As Steve said, we're kind of doubling up this year, in part because Steve didn't do it till late, but also our season didn't end in week.
Yeah, we normally
17.
wait till the seas's over, and this year it went all the way to the NFC Championship. So I don't feel I'm really a week late, not more than
right. So Steve sent this out on, I don't know, what was it, Tuesday, saying,
please somebody do this.
Yeah, someone do this real quick. We need to talk tight ends and we need to talk linebackers. I'll leave it up to you guys. You guys going to do tight ends first or linebackers?
Tight ends.
Tight ends first?
Sounds good.
So, free agency with our tight ends. Obviously, Washington Their starting tight end last year, Zach Ertz, is going to be a major free agent. He is also 34. He and Travis Kelce came out in the same draft class. So the sun is possibly setting for that whole generation of players. We know Ertz has said he wants to come back, whether he will or not, just because of his age and because of, Adam Peters wanting to build a roster through the draft, as we know long term. I don't know if it's going to happen or not. I personally, I liked what Zach Ertz brought. I would rather see him become the number 2, given the age, and I want to see a younger guy develop. But Ertz is probably gonna. He's definitely a free agent. I don't know if they'll have him test the market or what. Also John Bates, who Washington drafted 4 years ago, career low year. Also probably a free agent this season. Or, I mean, he's going to hit free agency almost certainly. I don't think they're going to re-sign him long term, which means they're really only left with 2 tight ends on the roster right now. One, Steve's favorite player, Colson Yankoff.
I just like his name.
Yes, yeah. Didn't play a single snap on offense all season, so really not really a tight end.
No, he was too busy doing other things on the sidelines. That's why.
There's a reason we don't go to sideline shots when he's on the sideline.
He's not presentable on camera.
But he's a special teams guy. He played a lot of special teams all season. That's what he's here for. And look, your 4th tight end, that's usually what they're doing anyway. So, not a big deal, but he's on the roster as a tight end, but you can't really count on that, which means really the only guy they got on the roster is Ben Sinnott.
And that's not saying much.
It's not saying much. You got to hope a guy drafted in the 2nd round is going to produce for you in the near future. But I don't know if you can bank on it, guys. Like,
he didn't really show anything good or bad. He just was there.
He had 5 catches for the whole,
right.
I think, the whole season.
But I mean, he's behind a solid pro,
right?
All Pro Bowler type in Zach Ertz. I mean, there may be a reason for it. So the question would be, and this is going to lead to what Alex is going to go over. Do they need to find a starter? Are they comfortable with Ben Sinnott? I can't imagine they're comfortable with Ben Sinnott. So do they bring Zach Ertz back, or do they let him go and bring in one of these other guys?
Yes, exactly. And there are some good tight ends in the free agent market this year. And I'm just going to go over some of the big names. There's not a lot of young prospects. I mean, usually if you're a good young player, you're going to be kept on the team you're on. So, let me just go through the guys who are out there. So Tyler Conklin, who was with the Vikings, he's 30 years old at this point. So he's, 4 years younger than Zach Ertz, worth mentioning. But if you're looking for that level of production that Ertz gave you, I think he's actually a perfect candidate to look at, because every year he gives you 500 yards, it seems like, 50 catches. So very reliable, productive tight end. Not game breaker. He's in what I'd call that 2nd tier now. There's, your tight ends who get close to 1,000, and then you've got a lot of guys who are closer to 500-yard guys. But he's in that category, so he could at least provide you some stability. You got Mike Gesicki, who also 30. He had a good season last season with Cincinnati. He kind of looked like he was done when he went there, because his numbers had been declining pretty steadily. But playing with Joe Burrow, I guess, puts up some points and puts up some numbers. Then you have Juwan Johnson, who he was, he's with the Saints. So since the Saints have no money, you got to figure he's going to be a free agent. Austin Hooper, who definitely passed his prime, but again, in that Ertz vein, former really good tight end. And, getting like these veteran guys might make a lot of sense in that regard. So those are your big pass catching ones. There are other guys out there who would probably be 3rd stringers, better blockers. Mo Alley-Cox and Harrison Bryant kind of fall into that category. There's a bunch of other names that are like if you hear them, you might not even know them level guys, to be honest.
I mean, Washington sure can maybe signs one of those, but
yeah,
to me, none of these guys are going to be noticeably more productive than Zach Ertz.
correct.
You're going to sign, and all these guys are old by NFL standards, 30, 30, 31.
30, 31, yeah.
I mean, John Johnson, 29, okay, but I don't know how any of these guys are an improvement over Ertz. He knows the system. He's here. He's comfortable with the team and the coaches. I mean, if you're going to do this, you might as well just pay Ertz. That's my view.
I mean, I generally agree too. Like, and I didn't even want to put Mercedes Lewis on there because he's 500 years old. Like, that guy just keeps playing, which is incredible. Good for him. But he's 41, I think, at this point. So you can't really look at that. And so, Steve, the only thing I would say is there is an argument. Yeah, they're all over 30, but there's a difference between 30, 31, and 35.
Certainly. Yeah, I mean,
these could be guys who would be here for 2 years instead of one last year for Ertz.
Because Ertz is going to be year to year.
Yeah, and probably you got to assume every year is his last year.
Yeah, you can imagine he's going to play more in a couple years more at most, I would think.
Right. A similar theme we'll have with linebackers, by the way.
Now, the one name to keep an eye on is Dallas. Dallas, I think is Goddard. How they say? Yeah, Dallas Goddard. Mm-hmm. He's gonna come into he's coming into a year. He's going to be looking for an extension from the talk up here and some of the
really
favorite players around here. But the problem is if he wants an extension, while they still have to decide on Mekhi Becton, Josh Sweat, Zach Bond, and some of these other younger players. I mean, Philly may make a decision on Dallas Goedert and just kind of letting him walk. That could be a surprise release. If they trade him, they're not going to trade him to Washington.
No, of course not.
But if they were to outright release him or let him go, I mean, that's a name to kind of keep an eye on. I think that was someone. Now, if he could stay healthy, he hasn't stayed. I mean, he's been dinged up almost every year. No like major injuries, but when he's on the field and he's utilized, he's a very effective tight end.
Yeah. Well, Philly has also just had a run of really good tight ends for 15 years, it seems like.
Is he more effective than Zach Ertz would be?
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. He's a number 2, like a good number 2 target on any team.
Yeah.
Even with the injuries and he's getting older, but that's the hypothetical if he were to get released situation. I don't know how much you can put into that.
Probably not a lot considering
I wouldn't
the
think
Super Bowl.
Yeah. So look, in the end, I think you would probably want to re-sign Ertz more than go after any of these other guys. Even with, there's some benefit to getting a guy who's a couple years younger. But look, Ertz and Daniel seem to have a good rapport. And I think that means something. Even if Ertz were to best case scenario, Ben Sinnott takes a step forward, he's your number 1, and Ertz becomes your number 2. I don't see why that. Like for what Ertz will cost, he'll cost you a couple million. Maybe 4, maybe 5. I don't remember what he was making last year, and I know Steve's already updated his charts. I don't want to make him go digging.
Yeah.
But he wasn't expensive last year. I know that much. He was pretty cheap.
I mean, in relative terms.
Yes. In NFL terms, he was relatively cheap. So let's say Ertz costs you $4 million. That's definitely worth it for even a backup tight end if he's productive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm just not impressed, and I mean, I think Ertz is probably. I mean, a lot of positions group I think they need to make moves on, but this is not one of them.
It isn't more because there isn't a name out there that you're like, yeah, go grab him, right? Like
or even just somebody with the massive production. It may not be a big name,
right?
And that doesn't seem to be here either.
There's not that, and I didn't put a bunch of these names on there. Guys under 30, there's just nobody worth really even talking about. I put Harrison Bryant in there. Like he's not he's about as productive as John Bates. Like,
there have been a bunch of busts out of the draft in the tight end group, or these guys that didn't live up to what was expected.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. So anyway, that's tight ends. Not a lot in there in the free agent market, unless you're willing to go older. And I don't know if it's really worthwhile for
Did
Washington
you
to do that.
opine on this question, Dave? What do you think?
Well, and that's where I talked about Goddard itself. As
Goddard?
far as the
But if you
as
can't get
far
him,
as far as a free now, Harrison Bryant was a guy that I've always kind of liked when he was in Cleveland. He's a good hands tight end. Doesn't have a lot of speed, but he's a guy that really he has a potential of control in the middle of the field and moving the chains. That's the kind of tight end. He's usually very reliable with hands. That's a guy that I like. Gesicki, I mean, he's a guy where it's like he has one big game and he disappears for 2 to 3 weeks, which is
Mhm.
baffling to me because he's coming out of college. He was a very, very good tight end. His first couple years in Miami, he kind of showed an upward trajectory, and then he just got kind of plateaued and it started to disappear a little bit.
Yeah.
But I mean, I just think right now, when you look in the list, I think Zach Ertz is the one guy. If he'd want to come back, you bring him back. I don't think you have much other choice on that, especially since he's became a reliable safety valve for Jaden Daniels. And coming Jaden Daniels' second year, that sophomore year, full season of tape on him. And if people think that he's not going to regress a little bit, at least early in the season at minimum, I mean, you're kind of fooling yourself a little bit because he's going to take a bit of a step back because his teams adjust to him. Now he's got to readjust to what those teams are doing. And it would be great. It'd be nice to have a reliable safety valve in Ertz like that in the middle of the field as he's making whatever counter adjustments he needs to do to the rest of the league during the course of the year. So I think Ertz just makes the most sense anyway.
The last thing I'll also mention, not because I know we're going to do the draft much later. There's a lot of decent and very intriguing tight ends in this draft class. Like 7 or 8 tight ends that I feel like could be serious NFL contributors. So I don't know. Like, I think if you feel like you need a tight end, that's where you should be looking this year. It's like 3rd round, 4th round. There's guys worth trying to give a shot.
I mean, they can't draft everything.
No, I know.
Right.
And especially when you're drafting late, you can't bank on anything. You're not going to get a blue chip at 29 necessarily even.
No.
So,
Yeah.
Yep. All right, let's move on to the other free agent group then that I covered, and that was linebackers. Now, similar to tight ends, Washington, as we know, they did a lot of free agent signings, and it was a lot of guys on 1-year deals, a lot of veterans. So other than Frankie Louvu, who fantastic season, like Frankie Louvu's exactly what you want as that outside linebacker. But everyone else they signed was a veteran who was on a 1-year deal for the most
Jordan
part.
McGee.
Yeah, they do have Jordan McGee, who they drafted last year, but he was hurt most of the year, so we don't really know what we have in him. I know
They don't have a linebacker group. That's what Alex is trying to say.
Yeah, we have one linebacker and one backup / special teamer
who was hurt.
Maybe who was hurt. So obviously we got to talk about Bobby Wagner, starting middle linebacker, Hall of Famer. Again, I don't know if is he ready to retire? We don't know. Like, he didn't say anything that I saw in the media if he's going to retire or not.
I haven't seen anything from him either.
Yeah, like Ertz was very public that he wants to come back.
Yeah, I think Wagner has expressed some interest on possible return because he built a really good chemistry with the team and locker room. He's just like Ertz. He said he felt rejuvenated coming on this roster. So if he plays another year, I think it's with Washington. I don't think he'll start over anyplace else. So
yeah, but again, that's a big if.
Right.
I don't think a guy like that's going to want to start over anywhere else.
No, I don't think so either.
No, because remember he went to LA for 1 year and he's like, nah, this ain't working. And then went back to Seattle.
Yeah, he didn't want to move again.
No.
Yeah.
No, and who would blame him? Because again, it's a year to year with someone at his point, so I wouldn't want to be moving all the time either.
And he had a good season too.
He had a very good season. You do also have to worry from the team's perspective. You don't want that, like last year, the guy can't really do it anymore.
Better known as the London Fletcher effect.
Yes, the London Fletcher, swinging your arms just in the general direction because you can't move your legs.
The London Fletcher Memorial Player Designation.
Right, you don't want that. And London was a great player for like every other
Many,
season
many
other than
years.
that last season, but
Yep.
he should have retired 1 year earlier, right? So of course the other name, a guy who they picked up that really produced well, Dante Fowler, as that like rushing outside linebacker, had led the team in sacks with 10.5. But again, 31. You have to worry about anyone over 30 when it comes to most positions, honestly, in the NFL now, other than quarterback. Right. And they also have a couple other backups, Mikhail Walker and Nick Belgore, who are really just special teamers. And they'll be free agents as well. What do you guys think about Fowler, though? Would you bring him back?
I think Fowler. I think you absolutely bring him back because he didn't really play much in the last couple of years, from what I understand. He's 31, but his body's not really in that 31 age in terms of miles on him. I think he fits perfectly in what Dan Quinn wants him to do. And if you could find yourself a better edge rusher, some younger, more of a athletic, more of an elite rusher off the edge. He's a guy who could bring on rushing downs, move left or right hand side, and you don't have to rely on him every single play or every single down. So, I mean, depth wise and the right price, of course, too. I think you definitely would bring him back.
I mean, he was the team's leading sacker.
Yeah.
They need a guy like that. If they're not going to draft somebody, a stud defensive end or whatever, they need this guy. So I think
I hope
they might need him anyway.
But yes. I hope they draft somebody as well, because they need two of them. You need two rushers,
right?
Really.
But I think he's been so productive at Washington. They really need to make an effort to bring him back.
Right. And also, I will say he fits a role in Dan Quinn's offense that you need to have, which is that pass rushing linebacker. That's always been a staple of what Dan Quinn likes to do, and he does it very well. So I'll go through the free agents. When you read what I wrote, I kind of split up the free agents as over 30 veteran guys versus the younger linebackers who you might be able to sign for a couple years, help build the roster around. So the older guys, there's a couple big names in there. Levante David, 35. Matt Judon, 32. Khalil Mack, who everyone seems to be talking about all the time.
He's the big name.
He's the big name. He's also 34. Like, I don't know if there's much logic in bringing in a 34-year-old. Not to mention, like, I don't see Khalil Mack as like a middle linebacker, right? Like, you want him to pass rush more than anything.
Right.
So I don't know if that's really what you want. The last name I'll mention, a guy, and I mentioned him because he's a Temple guy, Hassan Reddick. Total pain in the locker room. I think we all know that. I don't know how the Jets didn't release him, but when he produces, he produces. Like he could be a very highly productive pass rusher linebacker for you.
I think that Washington needs to draft a linebacker with the high pick.
I generally think that, but let me go through some of the younger names because there is some under 30 talent in the linebacking free agent group. Guy Steve loves, Isaiah Simmons is out there. I'm not saying he would be a starter. He would probably be a depth guy. That's a guy who had all the potential in the world and fell apart. So he's a reclamation project. But you do have names like Drake Greenlaw out of San Francisco, who was at one point a very good linebacker. He fell out of favor there. He was hurt most of the year. But there were a lot of things I was reading that he could become a free agent. So that would be an interesting one. I think if you brought him in and he's healthy, that's your middle linebacker replacement.
Right.
And he's 28, so he could be doing that for a couple years. You have Terrell Dotson, who was with the Dolphins, and he's been with Buffalo. Regular 100 tackle guy. Better in coverage, too, which is nice. Jerome Baker, who bit of a journeyman now. Was with Seattle and Tennessee both last year. Had a bit of a down year. And then Kaiser White was another one that I had listed there. Who he's 29. He's been on a bunch of different teams, but he's just a regular, like everyday starter, gets you 100 tackle kind of linebacker. So I think there are good. There's a bunch of good linebackers available in this free agent class. If let's say one of these guys, these older guys, they don't want to bring back, or they decide to retire, because honestly, Fowler could retire too at 31. That's not unusual for guys to retire at 31. So I wouldn't be shocked if they brought both those guys back, both these vets. But I also wouldn't be shocked if one of them says, I don't want to play anymore. You could find some other people in free agency here.
I mean, never forget that Washington had the third worst run defense in the league.
They did.
And part of that is linebackers who are supposed to fill gaps, keep the players from getting to the second level, and they routinely did it. So I don't know if the problem was that, like a Dante Fowler, for example, is a much better pass rusher than a run stuffer.
Right.
Maybe that is the case. Maybe it's not. I mean, the hardcore film guys know better than us. But what I do know is this can't just be a pass rushing thing. Washington needs to make a concerted effort to improve their linebacker core with people who can stop the run.
Right.
Don't just find Lawrence Taylor.
Right.
We don't run a 3-4. You don't need two pass rushing linebackers.
Right.
At all times. And they kind of have had that just by default because they didn't have a good defensive end group last year. So that's why you had Lulu rushing a lot. Fowler was brought in to be a pass rusher, so I'm not, knocking that. But I do think part of the run issue is, I think, the lack of end support, the lack of defensive tackle support in the run game. All that plays into it too. Like neither their defensive tackles are really the guy you want to try and take on two blockers. They're both better at bull rushing and trying to get to the passer.
I mean, Jonathan Allen's supposed to be smarter than that, but
I mean, it's not an IQ thing. It's a physical talent thing.
I'm talking about football IQ, but
sure, I know, but
in terms of linebackers, I mean, I think they need to make a signing.
I think right now, as long as T checks out healthy from his Achilles, if Greenlaw, well, it looks like he's going to hit free agency anyway. He has no interest in going back to San Francisco because he wasn't being utilized on the way that they wanted him. That was all part of the issue right there. But I think Greenlaw hits free agency and his Achilles checks out. I think he's going to absolutely be in Washington because of Adam Peters. I think Adam Peters is going to bring him here and watch because he's going to help solve the run defense issue without a problem. And his key obviously is the health because he's a sideline to sideline guy. Very, very fast, quick into the gaps, and he can recognize. He breaks down and recognizes the defense or the offense very, very well throughout the course of the game.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's a linebacker I'm trying to remember. He used to play with Seattle alongside of Wagner when Dan Quinn was out there. He was a really good coverage linebacker, a guy that he used to blitz with a lot, and guy
you're going back a ways. Like
yeah,
Legion
I am.
Boom
I'm
era?
trying to remember his name.
Like back in the Legion of Boom? Is that when?
Yes, right back in then. But there was a linebacker who was an excellent coverage linebacker on the tight ends, and he was utilized very well in the blitz. And he reminds me so much of Isaiah Simmons, and Isaiah Simmons is a guy that Dan Quinn can look at and go, can I make him that? So Isaiah Simmons, I think, will get a good look.
You're probably thinking of Bruce Irvin.
Maybe.
I think he was the other well-known linebacker from that.
Yeah, he was the other well-known linebacker. I'm not sure if he was their coverage guy there for linebacker. Why? Because there were three they had total because they played at 4-3, and he played a lot of I can't think off the top of my head, but either way, I think Isaiah Simmons is a guy that they will intrigue.
You can't rely on that, though. I mean, I always liked Isaiah Simmons in college. I thought he'd be far more productive than he was
He-
in the NFL. And you can sure take a chance on him. Great, I'm all for it. But I don't think they can take a chance on him at starter level money because
no,
the
no,
odds are
no.
it's not
No,
going to work.
I think he'd be like a Jeremy Chin type of 1 year signing, prove a type of deal. Because when he was in Arizona, he was not utilized at all to what his skill set
Right, and he was
was.
utilized even less last year by the Giants.
Exactly. So it's like, and Dan Quinn, he's going to utilize what he has in the talent that he has in the room right there. Can Isaiah Simmons live up to that? That's up to Dan Quinn to figure out. But I think in terms of what he has in skill set, I think that fits what Dan Quinn would want on his defense. But can Isaiah Simmons do it? That's up for them to figure that out.
The guy I would actually, I think Greenlaw is, by the way, who they're going to look at. Like, if I were
Real
to
heavy.
say the
Yep.
most likely big name free agent signing for this defense, that's who I'm looking at right now. And he's in that right age range where he's not too old yet. You could get, if you brought him in for 3 years, that would probably be perfect for like where he's at.
Right.
But I wouldn't count against looking at a guy like the Dodson, who's a really good coverage linebacker, which they've also kind of struggled with over the years, and just really reliable. But all odds are Greenlaw will be tied heavily to Adam Peters. So
Right.
I don't think you're wrong there.
I mean, the only thing I'd add to that is they don't have a lot of money tied up in the linebackers. What
No.
you don't want on a team is to have one or two position groups be massively overweighted. And in this case, linebackers are pretty small because they only have Luvu and McGee.
Right.
So they can afford to bring in a higher paid player.
Right.
Yeah. And I think bringing that guy in would make a lot of sense. I don't know how you would kind of platoon that if you had Wagner back then and you had.
Well, I don't think they would make that decision because Wagner's going to come with a fairly hefty price tag himself. If they
Yeah.
bring back Wagner, they're going to tinker around the edges.
Yeah.
For better or for worse.
Yeah.
Probably worse.
From a long-term roster building standpoint, it's probably for the worse. From a team morale standpoint, Wagner, I think Wagner's really respected in that locker room. I get that, and there's
Right.
value to that. We all recognize that leadership has some value, but yeah, this might be one of the more interesting positions to watch through free agency, just because there is some talent out there that they could bring in.
Well, and again, it's a bit of a dichotomy because Frankie Louvu, obviously, all pro, second team all pro, but the linebacker group itself had weaknesses along with
Right.
the defensive
Right.
front. And that's something they need to fix. Because defense, the old adage is really true. Defense win championships. Look at what the Eagles did.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You can't just be there the 83 San Diego Chargers, or I don't know what year. What is that? Dan Fouts' year? I might be past it.
Yeah.
But point
Dan
is,
Fouts. Yeah.
Notice what the Chargers under Fouts never did, despite
Right.
having the best offense in the league. You need defenses, and Washington's defense in 2024 was not good enough, not close to good enough.
Mm-hmm.
Even a league average defense would have helped, and they just didn't have that.
And speaking of the Eagles, is Zach Bond. If they don't give him an extension and he's out there, I'd be real careful on wanting him here because Zach Bond didn't do anything until he came to Philadelphia and he had that Pro Bowl year. Now you got to wonder, did he have that kind of a year because of the line in front of him, the secondary around him, and
Sure.
he didn't have to deal with offensive linemen in his face all game long. He was able to free to roam. He's not going to have that luxury in Washington with our defensive line.
It's an option. They need to be careful at a lot of these guys.
Yeah. Now I will say, and I know it's not gospel, but Spotrac, I looked at the market value for a lot. A lot of these guys we're talking about, they project them in the 7 million range per contract. Both Wagner and Greenlaw, for example,
Washington can pull that off. That's fine.
Yeah, I think you can afford to make two signings like that. That's not unreasonable for your linebacker.
Yeah, I agree. No, I think that's fine.
Yeah.
I agree.
It's if one of them wanted 19, 20 million, like a Khalil Mack contract. Yeah.
Yeah, that's not okay.
You're not doing that. Don't overspend on old people. That like
Old people, the world are gonna be mad at Alex East. Don't spend
well,
money on old people.
The good news is, Steve, they won't be mad at me for long.
A bit
So-
morbid, but also a bit true.
that's what we go for on this show.
Morbid, but true.
Yeah. But all right, so that wraps up our two first free agent groups. Next week, I had it in front of me, and I
I don't
probably
even
should
know
not have
what it
closed
is. I wrote it, and I don't even remember what it
it.
is.
Oh, I got it. Quarterbacks and defensive line.
So we did quarterbacks because the quarterback room is obvious. Who's in? We're talking about the backup, and it's
Right.
not a great mystery to that.
Yeah.
Right.
We try to save the exciting things for exciting weeks.
Right. Right. Quarterbacks will take us all of 5 minutes. I hope we have something more to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, the answer just may be they need to re-sign Marcus Mariota, but we'll get to that discussion next week.
Yeah.
Yep.
Actually, that will be a fun discussion because there are rumors that he might go all for and get a starting job. So
You can't mumble in the microphone when you're on the radio.
I know. I said there's rumors he might go elsewhere and get a starting job.
Even I couldn't understand what you were saying there for a minute.
Right.
And by the way, we're in year 10 of this show. Does everybody realize this out there? We've been doing this a decade. It's hard.
Steve
hard
had the same amount of hair. I've started going gray since we started the show.
Remember, Dave wasn't there, but our first show was 3.5 hours long.
It was. Dave knows. We've told his story. Dave,
Yeah,
many times.
only about 154 times.
Yeah. Well, the number of times
Okay,
we've told
fine.
that story to Dave, it's added up to 3.5 hours. Isn't that fun? All right. Well, that wraps up another show. Another off-season begins for the Washington sports team, which we will not name.
There you
But they
go.
play
I'm
football.
so happy.
And they're not the DC Defenders, who have a better name than the Washington Commanders.
That is
So.
true. Everybody has a better name than the
Right.
Washington football team.
Right. The Princess Polly's have a better football name. Than the Washington. I just pulled that one up. I don't know.
You made
what
that
is.
one up, but
Yep.
still, it's better.
Yes. All right, guys. We will talk to you all next week.
All right. Later.
Later.